I love stacking networking equipment, both physically for comedic effect. In fact, I've got one to add to the stack here. This one's got 2 phone ports on the back. I smell a future video coming on that. There we go. And of course, physically interconnecting stackable network hardware the way they were meant to be used. There's typically a management interface that lets you administer the whole stack as one unit. There are sometimes performance benefits to be had, and of course, if you configure the stack correctly, there is redundancy to be gained. So when a viewer named Torrance reached out with a pretty good deal on these stackable Nortel network switches, Business Policy Switch 2000s to be exact, I jumped at the deal. It'll be interesting to take a look at these Nortel units. I usually associate Nortel with like telephony and telecommunications providers in Canada. I think it was a Canadian company. So it'll be cool to look at this networking gear. Like I was saying, these are stackable. They both got the cascade modules installed, and I have one of the Nortel cascade cables. Hopefully that's all I need. So we're going to dive into these things and see what they're all about. I think they have a web management interface, which is always fun. And the CLI to control these over the terminal is eerily similar to Cisco's iOS software. So similar, in fact, that it seems like maybe they licensed it. I'm going to dig into that as well. Let's learn what these things are all about and see if we can get them stacking. Let's get into it. These did not fare very well during shipping. I think they were in perfect condition before they were sent to me. And at first glance, it looks like the bottom one's doing better, but nope. Massive crack right here. Got pretty banged up. They both, however, fared better than this poor Motorola T1 DSU CSU, which was also in the box. I'll be fixing this and trying to use it in a future video. I actually have plans to do a whole video on T1 and trying all sorts of different things, so if that sounds interesting, don't forget to subscribe. Back to these Nortel switches. These guys have 24 10100 megabit ports. I think these came out in 2001, best I can tell, so they're well over 20 years old.
This Nortel Business Policy Switch would have been aimed at small to medium businesses, and as you can guess by its somewhat odd name, Business Policy Switch, it was marketed at least as more than just a switch. The policy it's referring to is something called quality of service. You can configure this thing to prioritize types of traffic in a different way. So for example, you could prioritize your voice and video traffic over regular web surfing. This isn't too big of a deal these days. Plenty of equipment has quality of service capabilities, but it probably would have been a big deal 25 years ago.
Got a serial console port on the front. We'll be using that to interact with them and get them reset. Got this expansion module bay. Let's see what that's all about. Doesn't want to come out. It's like stuck. Figure that out when we take the lid off. It's also got the cascade module expansion on the back, of course. Let's see if this slides out a little nicer. That one's playing nice. Cool little board. Nortel Networks Chameleon Stack MDA MB motherboard. Kind of cool. It's got a Bay Networks chip on there. There are plastic pieces falling out all over the place. There's at least a couple screws on the back, and it looks like we're going to want to take those off. Or at least we did. The stud that this is going into has broken off this plastic part, I guess. Yeah, the little post was behind there for the screw, and it probably was structural at one point. I'm abandoning that. It is not at all obvious to me how this case comes off, and I'm just making it worse. I keep breaking more plastic off. So we're just going to dive right in. I've got this serial to USB converter. We're going to plug it in here. I believe I have powered this one up, and I've not powered this one up. So this one, like, at least partially works, at least as far as I could tell. So I'm going to power this on, and we'll take a look at the console. It looks like we're going to get quite the light show here. So let's power it up, see what happens. Nice. Running some sort of self-check. I'm not seeing anything on the console yet. It's implying it's fine.
There we go. I needed to get rid of the null modem adapter, and we're in. Nortel Networks, copyright 2002. So that's the firmware version, at least we probably have. It says Control Y to begin. It's kind of an interesting setup. Let me adjust this for you. It's got this cool serial interface. I'm a sucker for these serial interfaces. I really think they're cool. So let's go into IP config setup, I guess. Ooh, stack IP address. That's a good sign. In-band switch IP address. I must have done this. 8831. Yeah, there is like a lot in here. So let's take a look at the command line interface. Now, you'll notice this is awfully similar to Cisco. So Cisco does this thing where you hit the question mark and immediately it shows you the help. That's a very iOS thing. And then we've got enable. Let's see if EN works. It does. It's just uncanny. Let's see what the story is with copy. Yeah, copy configurations from TFTP. Let's do configure terminal. And again, a lot like Cisco. Show IP adder. Sort of interesting, right? I guess this isn't very fun if you don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, the Cisco iOS CLI is very, very similar to this. It feels nearly identical. So I want to say, so let's get out of here. I want to say there is a web management. Oh, there it is. Web access configuration. And over here, you can see it is enabled and anyone is allowed to view it. So, well, let's get this thing on a network.
I've explained it before and I'm going to explain it again because it's so incredibly useful if you like messing around with stuff like this. One of these patch panel ports goes directly through back to the room with the rack and passes right to a dedicated NIC on my Proxmox server.
And said NIC is passed directly through to this Windows XP VM and I can get it on whatever network I want. That thing was on 192.168.88, so we'll throw this one on that network as well. Let's see if we can ping this thing from the VM. We can. That's good. Let's check out this web management interface. We'll try IE first. Let's hit that endpoint. Ooh, yeah, look at this. Look at this tiny little diagram of it. Oh, are we going to get a stack diagram? That'd be exciting if we stacked them and we see both. We'll see. We can reset it, apparently. What do we got? Some stats, port stats. Oh, yeah, dude. Let's look at the port we're using. Submit. Yep. It's doing stuff. Let's see what kind of website we're dealing with here. This has to be generated by the server. Look at all this. If 1 is greater than 1, that's never going to be true. And then down here you've got all this if 1, always true. If 1 equals 1, also always true. This must be generated by the server. There's no way a human wrote that. Old JavaScript from the early 2000s is always like fascinating. We got a Java jar that this thing is trying to load to build. It's an applet that it's loading on the left side here. Look at this, some sort of custom DSL language, or maybe this is some Java thing to build the menu items up. Oh, that's not HTML. It's got a full-blown help that ships with the unit. That's pretty cool. It's always kind of nice, I suppose, especially back then. You can, of course, fully configure the switch from here. Stack operational mode. Pure stack versus hybrid stack. We will explore that if we get this second unit working.
Well, this one works, but I guess I kind of already knew that. I'd powered it up before. I've never powered this one on. I don't have any reason to believe it doesn't work, but we're basically going to go through that same flow, and then we're going to hook them up with the cascade unit and see if we can get them stacking. Power this one up. Oof. The fans are in worse condition, that's for sure.
I'm actually catching the boot up this time. Oh, those fans are bad. Look at this. It's a bay stack. That thing sounds like it's about to explode. This one's got way newer firmware. Let's get this thing out of here. This is crazy.
There's been some developments. So of course, 5 minutes after the thing was running, the fans sound fine now. But I wanted to get them in the other room anyway. So I've got this terminal server on top, which actually just lets me, theoretically, access the serial ports over my network. The machine we already tested and looked at works just fine, but I cannot access this second one over this terminal server for some reason. I thought for sure it was going to be my cabling, but nope, this works just fine, believe it or not. So I'm going to try out another terminal server. Got the Cisco terminal server up there, complete with squid cable. That's always an impressive sight to behold. Let's see if we have better luck here.
I'm back, and I've learned some things. Here, we'll access the console over telnet of the one we've already seen. That's the one on top of the stack. And we get in here, press enter, we get a terminal bell, and we see the Nortel Networks splash screen. Notice it says Control Y to begin at the bottom. Now, let's hit the one we're trying to access. It's at the bottom of the stack right now. And we're in. We just hear the terminal bell. Nothing. Nothing on the screen. just a bell every time I hit enter. The other terminal server was doing this as well. I was suspicious of the bell because that means you're connected to something. I don't think you can get that if you're just hitting an empty telnet port. It turns out, after a lot of trial and error, this thing can't show its splash screen over telnet for some reason. That bay stack thing we saw earlier. If you hit Control Y, you get into the switch. So it was accessible the whole time. Anyway, we can see them both now. Let's poke around here. This one is still configured with its old IP address, a 10.199 IP address. I've poked around through these menus and there's really nothing of note. So what we're going to try to do is reset to default settings just to see what happens when you do that to one of these switches. Set that to yes. So this is probably going to do a hard reboot on the switch and I'll be back. Oh, actually this is kind of cool. You can see right as it starts up, it's doing its diagnostic stuff, decompressing its firmware image, pretty typical switch stuff. Interesting, when you're already connected, you can see it draw out its base stack stuff. This is that thing that just like won't show up when you terminal in. Let's do Control Y again. I think we're in a default setting. Let's get this one on the same network as the other switch, just for consistency. By default, the web administration is enabled, so let's go check that out. The other one was .31. This is going to be .30. Well, we're in. The other one was from 02. It looks like this one's from 2004, so of course slightly newer. Same horrendous looking image of the switch. I'm going to go read the documentation a little bit to learn about how to stack these. Okay, did a bunch of research, and the first hurdle we might have is it wants the switches to have the same software version to be in a stack together. The one I just powered up that I was having trouble with is software version 3.1. The one we were playing around with in the beginning of the video is on software version 2.5. So maybe these things were never even stacked together. You'll also remember in the UI there was this hybrid versus peer stack notion. A peer stack is only the style of switch I have, the BPS 2000, but you can mix and match these base stack 410 and 450 switches. Base stack is just a branding of network equipment that Nortel also made. So we'll be in peer stack mode. And then there's the cabling. It really wants you to cascade them together in a loop for redundancy reasons. I only have one cable, so I'm not even sure if it's going to let me get away with that. So for example, you would have this loop on the right going around connecting the stack together so that if a unit in the middle went down, the ones on the top and the ones on the bottom can all communicate. It's a redundancy thing, and I only have one cable, so hopefully this works. The final piece of the puzzle is selecting what's called a base unit. So the whole stack has this idea that one unit is sort of in charge or coordinating, I think, and you physically select that with this base unit switch. Up means this is the base unit. All the other things in the stack have to be down. I'm going to opt to have the one with the newer software as the base unit. I'll put the other one down. And then the more I'm reading the documentation, the less hopeful I'm getting that one stack cable is going to work, but we'll be cascading out of this one and into the one on top. I'll power it up and we'll see how we do. First, I have to do some very fine pin adjustment work. Luckily, it's just one, but it was like way out of whack and the connector couldn't get in there. Okay, here we go. They're both up again, and they both know that they're physically connected with that cascade cable. On the front panel, there's a cascade section of LEDs for the up and down link, and then this base LED. One of them has an amber for up, and one of them has an amber for down, because I only have one cable, so they know they can't make a loop, but they do know that they're connected in at least one direction. And they're both just blinking the base LED. What this theoretically means is they can't find a base unit, like your jumpers are misconfigured. I suspect it's software. I can access both switches as before, and they are in switch mode, so there's no indication that they've attempted to stack or anything. I think what I need to do is try to get that other switch upgraded to this exact software version. I'll go start looking to see if I can find this image and then follow the instructions. Otherwise, maybe we can get it off of this unit, Cisco style. That'd be nice. It's going to be very hard to find the software for these things, and I can't figure out a way to get it off the one that has what I need the way you would with Cisco. It seems like Avaya got Nortel's networking gear assets after they went bankrupt, and they still have like BPS 2000, these switches, like support articles and stuff on their website. They're old and they haven't been touched in a while, but still, I think you might have to go through them if you could even find these images at all. I have one more thing I'm going to try, which is to make the other unit the base unit. I doubt it'll work, but I'll show you some other stuff I learned. If we go ahead and reset this switch, and while it's resetting, we hit Control C. as it's trying to boot, we get into this like kind of diagnostics thing. And I think I will actually let you like reset the password. So if you got one of these and you don't know the password, do it that way. You can also run a cascade external loopback test with C. And mine fails, of course. Something about stack upstream clock failed, so they're not getting along very well. I'm going to power them off, swap which one's the base unit, power the stack back on, and we'll see.
Yeah, flipping the base switch around didn't have any effect. They're just as confused as before and can't talk to each other properly, at least from a stacking perspective. I have managed to accumulate a pretty impressive stack physically throughout the course of this project, at least. Check this out. My rack is on the verge of overwhelming the one outlet it's plugged into at all times, so I've shut my network down like twice on accident today. Anyway, this is going to a different circuit. I've got these power distribution switches for future retro rack expansion plans. Check this out. Turn this all on. How satisfying is that? Earlier in the video, I had been remarking how the CLI interface on those Nortel switches was remarkably similar feeling to the Cisco iOS interface on their networking gear. And then while I was troubleshooting this original terminal server I was trying to use before I replaced it with the Cisco one with the squid cable, I noticed that this one is an awful lot like iOS as well. So maybe they were all just copying each other or copying Cisco, or I don't know. Let me show you what I mean. This thing's got a management port of its own, of course. Let's manage that locally in here. It also has a modem. I really need to play with that in a future video. Kind of has a cool startup sequence, as I recall. Yeah, not that cool. Counts down from either side.
Never seen it do this. Okay, it's booting. It's a PowerPC. I didn't know that. I knew it was running Linux, but I didn't know it was a PowerPC RISC processor in it. That's pretty cool. Learn something new every day playing with this stuff. I don't know that I've ever watched this thing fully boot over the console. Usually I just wait for it to come up and I'm using the ports to access a different device. Appliances like this, by that I mean you turn it on and it just starts working, hopefully, are fascinating to me. So it boots a whole Linux kernel and then gets into its software. And I'm telling you, it just does this every time. Software is very hard to write and very hard to make good and very hard to make consistent. So I'm always fascinated by these appliances, these network appliances that just work. It's incredible. So let's see, I think the default is in reach and the password is access. I cannot remember if it's capital A. It must not be. So right away we can do a question mark. Sort of feeling like Cisco. And then we can do show. Also very Cisco-esque. So I think a lot of people were just copying Cisco, or maybe Cisco got this from somewhere else. Is this, I find the Cisco iOS style interaction, once you wrap your head around it and get used to it and get a few reps under your belt, I find it very easy and nice. I actually like it quite a bit. So for example, we can enable, I think the default root password is system on these things. It is. They are kind of doing their own little thing where this double chevron thing means your root. You know, Cisco doesn't quite do it like that. And so you can configure all these ports. I'm trying to remember. So for example, you can do show port async summary, this kind of sequence of show and then what you want and kind of hierarchy stuff. It's logical, of course, but to me, it's very Cisco-esque while we're here. Each of the 8 ports on the front are serial ports with RJ45 connectors, and I can configure their baud rate. So I must have needed port 4 to be at 115/200 at one point for whatever reason. Yeah, I love these things.
Sometimes you just can't stack. It's not meant to be. I think if I could get my hands on the right software, these would stack. I was just taking a slightly closer look at these things, and the one with the older software was built in 2001, and the one that happens to have the newer software was built in 2002, but they're identical. There's no reason that I know of that this one couldn't be running the same software that that one's running and that they could stack. It's sort of a shame for this older gear that no one's making money off of anymore. I mean, Nortel's gone. Whoever bought all this crap, Avaya or whoever else, they're not making money on these business policy switch 2000s that are over 20 years old. But all the software, realistically speaking, remains walled off. I'm sure there's some IT folks out there, network administrators that have their hordes of Nortel software. Maybe I'll even get a comment or two. But if you're just messing around in your home lab and playing with some gear you found on eBay, or I bought this from a very generous viewer, it's kind of a shame that it's not easy for me to use this pretty impressive piece of hardware the way it was meant to be used. because of this software issue. All that being said, these seem like pretty capable switches. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them yet or what I'll dedicate them to. I'm sure eventually I'll be able to hunt down the software over time. It's always fun to play with the different flavors of enterprise networking hardware. This is the first Nortel gear I've ever messed with, so I'm excited to get my hands on more and see if they were kind of building up some sort of ecosystem like some of the other providers did. We didn't get to stack, but I had a pretty good time trying to figure out what these things were all about and mess with my 2 terminal servers. That was fun. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and as always, I have a Patreon where I post behind the scenes type videos, sneak peeks at what I'm working on, and that sort of thing. I've got more enterprise stuff on the way. I hope I see you in the next one.